My suggestion.
We are up to Kumlen and Ablat Gemara, Mitzvah Shabbos Parshas Lech Lecha. We are up to Dav Zayin Amid Aleph, the top of the page. We're going through every part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said there are 4 different Rosh Hashanahs, so we are working our way through and determining each Rosh Hashanah what it is. So says the Gemara, we also learned in the Brisa. We're still focusing on the first day of Nisan. In our Mishnah, it says the first day of Nisan is Rosh Hashanah for the Yom Tevim. You follow Rab Shimon that the first, if you promise to bring a carbon, you have 3 Yom Tevim to bring them. Otherwise, you've committed a lav of Balta Acher. You shouldn't delay. But it's specifically if you follow the order of Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. So therefore, Pesach is the Rosh Hashanah L'Regalim. Okay, so that's the, and also we had that Pesach is Rosh Hashanah L'Melachim. We said it's Rosh Hashanah for kings, for Jewish kings. If you date the kingdom, when he, I guess when he assumed the throne, we date it to Nisan. So if he became a king 29th day of Adar, it's already a year, and we'll call the next year the second year. Okay, so now the Gemara says, in the Brisa, there are a few other things that Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for. Tell them what we learned. The Echad Nisan, the first day of Nisan, is Rosh Hashanah L'Chadoshim. It's Rosh Hashanah for months. That means the first month of the year is considered the Nisan. Uli Iburin, when we have to make a leap year and we make a second Adar, like this year that we're in, and we calculate, as we'll soon see, by Nisan. Right now, the Gemara thinks that the Nisan itself is when they make the calculations, and we'll soon see it cannot be. Or the Truma Shkolim, when we learned already before in Shkolim that they have to, in Adar, they go out there and make the announcements, and comes Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they have to use the new Shkolim to pay for all the communal kabbalas. The Yesh is another opinion. When you come and to rent a house, and you say that if you say you rent it for a year, obviously 12 months. If you say I'm renting it for this year, when does this year end? The 30th day of Adar, 29th day of Adar, Rosh Chodesh Nisan is a new year. And the Gemara will discuss all that. Now let's go through the Brisa. You started off saying L'Chadoshim Minolon. How do you know? First of all, what's the difference? You tell me that this is considered the first month of the year. What's the relevance of that? What's the difference? The difference is that Rash ben Adar Shoyin says simple. In the Torah, we don't have names of months. Everything goes by number. The first month, 7th month, the 11th month, the 5th month. So all we know is that the first month you have to eat matzah. The 7th month you have to have, you have the Rosh Hashanah. But how do we know which month we're talking about? Which is the first, which is the 7th, which is the 5th, all that. How do we know? So therefore, the Mishnah says that Nisan is considered the first month on our calendar. So if the Torah said the first month, it's Nisan. 7th month is Tishrei. So it's important to know. So the Gemara wants to know, how do you know? So how do you know that Nisan is the first month? Says the Gemara, so how do you know Pesach is Nisan? Maybe Iyar is the first month and Pesach should be in Iyar. Or maybe Sivan is the first month and Pesach should be in Sivan. And Shavuot is the 3rd month, should be in Av. How do we know? Says Gemara, even though tradition tells us that's how it is, but how do we glean it from the Torah? See, the pasuk says, this month is the first month of the year. This is talking about Pesach. This is the first month of the year. And that's when he tells us to take, each one should take a sheep. And it says that the 10th day of this month, each one should take a sheep for their entire family. And you should guard it until the 40th day of this month. Now, all we know is that all of this takes place the first month. But which is the first month? How do we know which month it is? Because so we know that the first month relates to Pesach. We have another pasuk which talks about Pesach, and that's in the Devarim. Over there it says, it's a Shomer Chodesh Aviv. You should protect Pesach, and the Torah calls it the Chodesh of Aviv of spring. And then you should make a Pesach. So now we know something else, additional information, that this first month, which is Pesach, is also the month of spring, and it's Aviv. And Ezel Chodesh Yesh Aviv, and Aviv doesn't actually mean spring. Aviv means when the plants begin to sprout. Which month is when the plants blossom? In the northern hemisphere, that's the month of Nisan. So that's how we know that since Pesach is the first month of the year, and we know elsewhere Pesach has to be when they begin to blossom. So therefore, we know that it is the month of Nisan. The Kadar Leidisha refers to as the first month. That's how we know. Says the Gemara, how do you know? the Ema Ir, maybe it's the month of Ir as well, because by then, all the plants already blossomed and all the stalks and everything that we grew. No, Be'ina Aviv, we need it to be happening, not in past tense. It already happened because it happens during the month of Nisan. And therefore, Ir is already post that event. So it can't be Ir. So, okay, the Ema Other. Other already starts, and some plants already begin to bloom then. So maybe Other, something the wheat starts growing, maybe the month of Other when it begins. That's when the Pesach is, and that's the first month of the year. Says the Gemara, could be Ina Reiv Aviv Beleka. We need that the majority of the stalks, that's when they become ripe, and that does not happen in Other. Other, you have a few, those who are early, but Nisan is when the majority. Says the Gemara, Midei Reiv Aviv. See, where does the Torah say that you need the month, the Pesach should be on the month when the majority of the stalks are ready? It just says Aviv. Maybe it means when it begins. Maybe Taka Other is the first month of the year, and Other is when Pesach should be. So Gemara says you're right. That is not conclusive. I'll bring another proof. Forget Nisan, let's talk about Tishrei. Tishrei is called the 7th month, but the Torah elsewhere describes certain behaviors in that month, which indicates to us we're talking about Tishrei. It says in the passage regarding Sukkot, on the 15th day of the 7th month. So we know we're talking about the 7th month. Is Sukkot? Now the question is, which month is the 7th month? So the Torah says, but this is the time when you gather in all the tfuah of your land. So which month is it that they bring everything inside? Is when they want to make sure that it doesn't get ruined in the rain. But during the summer, they put it out, leave it out in the field so it can dry. Then they bring it in to put into their warehouses, the silos, the granaries. Which month does it take place? That Tishrei. That takes place Tishrei. Because later on, it starts raining and ruin everything. Earlier, it's beautiful and sunny. They want to leave it out there to dry. So it's the month of Tishrei. So the 7th month is Tishrei. We know from Asachem. So then we work our way back. Nisan is the first month. That's how we know that Nisan is the first month, and that's when Pesach takes place. Because Kodel Shvi is called the 7th month. Says the Gemara, how do you know that's not my Cheshvan? Maybe it's the month of Cheshvan. Because by Cheshvan, so everything's already gathered into the silos and the granaries, the threshing floors. Maybe Shvi, maybe Shvi Le'ir, maybe Ir is the first month of the year, and that's when Pesach should take place. Says the Gemara, we're not talking about after the Asifa, we're talking about the time of the Asifa. And therefore, Cheshvan already, it started raining. Everyone brought it into their silos already before Cheshvan. So it must be the month of Tishrei. Says the Gemara, Ve'ema El. Maybe it's the month of El when people start bringing it in. Umay Shvi L'Adar. And El is the 7th month, and the first month is Adar. That's what Pesach takes place. Says the Gemara, Be'ina Roiv Asif. We need the month when the majority of your grains you bring inside to the threshing floor and the silos and all that, and that takes place in Tishrei. You might ask the same question. Midei Roiv Asif Ksiv. Does it say when the majority? Maybe when you begin to bring it into the house, and that's actually taking place in the month of Elul. El Amar Avinu says you're right. You're right. There is no evidence from the Torah. It's an amazing thing. Nowhere in the Torah do we know when Pesach should be held, or when you can argue. It could be Adar, it could be Nisan or Tishrei, it could be El, it could be Tishrei. We have no proof. But Divrei Kabbalah, you know what we know from? From Tanakh. From Tanakh. Now, it says that even though in the Torah all the months have different numbers, it says in the Gemara Yerushalmi that the Eden, when they came back from Bavel, they brought with them the names of the months that we have today. So Megillas Esther, we have a number of names. Zechariah, you have a number of names. That's where we have the names of the months. The Gemara there says also that's when they brought the names of the Malachim. Prior to the Eden being a Bavel, we have no names. Echad men HaMalachim, everything is one of them. Srafim, we have no names. A particular Gavriel, Michal, and all of these names, they all were brought up with the Eden from Bavel. That's what the Shami says. So we bring a proof. It says in the Vim, it says there, on the 24th day, we're talking about in the reign of the Yavish. It's all during the reign of the Yavish. We learned a few days ago. The Yom Esir Abba, the 24th day, La Ashte Es Asachede, to the 11th month, Hu Chodesh Shvat. Clearly, it tells us that Shvat is the 11th month. This is in Zechariah. So we know that Nisan is the first month. Rabba Bar Ula Oma Mahach. Rabba Mula says, we know it from Esther. Esther, we have a few months recorded over there. Even though Esther is not Nevi'im, it's Ksuvim, we can also call it Divrei Kabbalah, tradition. Vatilokach Esther el Melech Achashverosh. She was taken to King Achashverosh. Al Beis Malchus to his kingdom. Ba'chodesh Asidi on the 10th month. Hu Chodesh Teves. Says clearly there the 10th month is Teves. In other words, the first month is Nisan. Rav Kahana says for the following pasuk as well, and he says, which pasuk also from Megillas Esther, and it says here, back to Zechariah. It says here that in the 4th year, by Arba on the 4th year, the Chodesh Hatshi, and this is Zechariah, in the 9th month, which happens to be Kislev. So here now we know if Kislev is the 9th month. Did we have the names?
Did we have the names at that stage of the mazolos of the constellations, the stars?
I don't know. I don't know when those names where they came from.
The Greek mythology.
We have some of them are in Tehillim. I don't know.
The names come from Greek mythology.
I talk about our names that we have in Shapsoi and all that.
All those mazalos are just the same as the ones from Greek mythology.
Doesn't mean anything. But the names of the mazalos.
Names come from the names.
Chama does not come from Greek. The names are not Greek names, the Hebrew names.
No, but they're the same. They're the same shapes. Like where.
That's not what he's asking. He's asking the names where they came from.
Of the
actual
mazalot
names.
Yeah.
You're asking the question of Iyar, Shvat, Nisan. Where did the actual word come from, right?
I'm sort of like asking a general question in terms of how they fit into to all these.
All the Yishalmi talks about is the names of the months and the names of the Malachim. It came with the Eden from Babel, and but regarding other things, I'm not sure.
I'm just not understanding why the Mazolos has got something to do with us, with
We don't mention Mazolos here at all. Why are we asking about Mazolos now?
No, I just know that there's a general discussion.
Yes, we had Gemara Shabbos of Kufnun Vavam and Aleph. The Gemara they talked about how the Mazel affects, which day of the week you were born and which hour of the day you were born. Mazolos, and then the Gemara concludes when it comes to Eden, Ein Mazel Yisro, we're not affected by the Mazolos. The Gemara at the very end of Shabbos of Kufnun Vavam and Aleph there.
Does it mention something in today's parasha when he says Lech Lecha Stiglitz Shalai? Took it the astrology.
He says you should go out of your mazolos, as Rashi says. Out of your mazol, your mazol. Avram is not meant to have any children, but Abraham will. But
yeah,
Rashi
there, yeah.
Rashi says that in Chumash, yeah. Have a very clear pasuk. It says by Yikoru Sofer Melo Beisahi. The scribe, this is back to Megillas Esther. The scribes then read at that time, B'chodesh Hashlishi, the 3rd month, U'chodesh Sivan. This is the month of Sivan. So here you have again, 3rd month of Sivan. We have so here the names that start to crop up. And Rav Ashi says Mahachad. I have a better name. It says Hipul Pur Hu Agoyel, again from Esther. That Haman went ahead and he made the lottery. Lifnei Haman, before Haman, Miyoim Liyoim, Mechodesh Lechodesh, Shnei Masa 12. Hu Chodesh Adar, the month of Adar. So if Adar is 12, then Nisan is 1. Then we finally bring the following pasuk, where this pasuk is the clearest of them all. It says over there again in Megillas Esther, B'chodesh Adishon Hu Chodesh Nisan. It says clearly in the pasuk that Nisan is the 1st month of the year. Now the Gemara is sort of a bit stupefied. So why do you have to bring all these other psukim to prove that Nisan is the 1st month when you have a clear pasuk in the Megillah where it says that Chodesh Adishon is Chodesh Nisan? End of story. Says Gemara, cool, my time high. Why don't the rest use this pasuk? Gemara, because you can argue Dilma Mai Rishon, when it says here the 1st month, it doesn't mean the 1st month on our calendar, but Rishon Lemilsa, this is the 1st month when the story of Haman started. As we all know, the story of Haman happened during the month of Nisan, not in the month of Adar. It all happened in the month of Nisan. He was hanged on the 2nd night of Pesach, and so on. So maybe when it says Rishon, the 1st month, I mean this is the 1st month of when this whole tragic story occurred. But we want to prove from other psukim that Nisan is the 1st month on our calendar. Says the Gemara, the Tana Didan. Our Tana, why Taka doesn't now? Our Tana only mentions that Nisan is Shana Regolim, and why doesn't it mention Chadashim? It says Malachim and Regolim. Why doesn't it mention Chadashim? Says the Gemara, the Tana Didan B'Shanim Kamayim only talks about years, but B'Chadashim like Kamayim, not talking about months. That doesn't mean literally years, because in the Mishnah it says Yom Tovim, 3 Yom Tovim. Remember, we learned recently that you can have Friyim Tevim and yet not go through an entire year. So it doesn't mean years, but it means a lot more, longer than just a month. Okay, the next thing the Brisa says that Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for Iburim, for calculating the extra month of the year. Says the Gemara, Nisan, where does Nisan come into Iburim? Iburim and Nisan Manina, we count from Nisan. On the contrary, not only we don't count from Nisan, you're not allowed to even count Tishrei. You're not allowed to count before Tishrei and Elul, which is a lot closer to other. Well, time we learn, you're not permitted to calculate the leap year before Rosh Hashanah. And if you did, that doesn't work. And the reason is, if you're going to tell people by Rosh Hashanah that this year will be a leap year, by the time Adar comes around, they'll forget. It's too far away. You have to wait till it's closer. When they have no choice. What do you mean they have no choice? Because sometimes the government realized that the calendar is pivotal to our observance of Torah, mitzvahs, and Yom Tovim. So many times the government would decree you're not allowed to calculate, you're not allowed to make a calendar. If they felt that there's some kind of gzera looming on the horizon, so they have an opportunity now in Tishrei to calculate whether you need a leap year, they should do it straight away. If you have no choice,
Going upstairs.
You
Okay.
what do you call it? You right away after Rosh Hashanah, you make the leap year. We have no choice. And regardless of when you determine you should make a leap year, which month is it that we add a others? Even though you had no choice, we did Tishrei. It's very early in the year. We're worried that people are going to forget. Nevertheless, the only month that you can calculate to make an extra month is the month of Adar, no other month. And we learn out from a pasuk which says Shmoyer as Chodesh Aviv. You should, like we said before, you should protect and make sure that Pesach comes out in the month of Aviv. So we darshan. How do you do that? By inserting a Chodesh before the Aviv, inserting and adding Chodesh around that time, which means Adar.
From where do we learn that it's Adar?
So what does our Mishnah mean?
Where do we learn that it's Adar?
What?
How do we know that it's Adar?
Sorry?
From where? How do we learn out that it's Adar?
Because it says Chodesh Aviv. The Chodesh that's right by Aviv. When you realize that Aviv is not coming around, you have to make Pesach. And that month, add another month. And that month will be Adar. And so the Gemara's question is, so why does this Brisa say that the month of Nisan is Iburim? What does Nisan do with Iburim? You don't calculate the Nisan Ibur. You don't make an extra month Nisan. What's going on here? It means this is when you no longer can calculate. As we'll see, there's an argument in the month of Adar till when can you make the calculation that you require an extra month. We can learn in Sanhedrin in the first parak the criteria when they add another month. If the roads are muddy, if they don't have yet goats for Pesach, there are different criteria. Some of them are so vital that even just one of them isn't met. You'll add another month. And other criteria is not that vital. You need two of them to have two of those areas that haven't been fulfilled. Then we will add another month. So there's an argument whether you have till the middle of Adar to decide whether to add another month or till the very end of Adar. We have a story that Chizkiah HaMelech, on the very last day of Adar, when they declared it's going to be Rosh Chodesh, it was supposed to be Rosh Chodesh, they decided that day to turn it into another month, add another Adar, and he was punished for doing that, because on that day, the day that's supposed to be Rosh Chodesh, it's too late, you can no longer calculate. So our mission is saying here, we follow the opinion that says the entire Adar, you can still calculate the new year, and it stops as soon as Rosh Chodesh comes about. And what's the story there? Hafsakas ibud. We're talking about when you can no longer calculate. Now we learn the Mishnah. Hein heidu. That puppies, I'm sure they both testified that Shema Abrin Hashana Kolad, that you have the entire month of Adar to determine whether you need an extra month, or additional month. So I mean, they would say Adar Purim. There were those who said Purim is the cutoff. Why is Purim the cutoff? My time of what's the view? Why is their view Purim is the cutoff? The man the Amar Purim. What's their reason? Kivan Amar. We learned in Gemara Pesachim. Shoylin behilchas Pesach koydel lePesach shleishim yom. That the custom was they would darshan. There's two views in the Rishonim how to learn Shabbat. Whether they used to start darshaning all the rabbis from Purim and onwards all the laws of Pesach, or that they didn't start darshaning a month before. But if somebody would ask them a question about Pesach, then it would be considered appropriate. So 30 days before they would talk about Pesach, and imagine that they're all getting ready for Pesach, and a week later they decide, you know what, we're going to add another month. people won't believe them, and they'll still behave. We know it's Pesach in 30 days. We already had drushes from our Rav. It's all about Pesach. So they won't believe these agents that come from the Bezin saying, hey, Pesach has been postponed for another month. Therefore, they decided that Purim should be cut off. They are going to have chametz when the real Pesach comes along. So how come the other people weren't concerned? They said you have the entire month of Adar, because they say that average person understands. Maybe everyone knows the shasam abarta b'chuzmataymus. It's not some kind of exercise kasut. They have to calculate. They have to look at the circumstances and make a decision. And sometimes it's it's very fluid, and they have to decide at the last moment. The sovereign they'll say, well, we thought that Pesach would be, a month from Purim, but they realized they couldn't make the correct calculation at either now. Suddenly they realized we need another month. The question now goes back. So why doesn't Al Mishnah mention this? Why doesn't Al Mishnah mention that Nisan Rosh Hashanah for Ibur to cut off? So the Gemara says, our Tana is talking about things that begin, not things that end. All the Rosh Hashanahs that we're talking about is for, there's another year for the king, or this is another year, for Baal Ta'ach. It's always new things, not this is when you can no longer do something. The last thing it says in the Brisa here is, according to Tanakama, the Trumas Shkolim, that this is when they used for the Kabbanas, the new coins that people donated. Says Yemar Minolan, how do you know that this is the cutoff? Amar Rabbi Yoshia Amakra. There's a passage where it says that Zois Oilas Chodesh, this should be the Oil of Chodesh, Bechotche, the new one, Lechatshe Hashanah for the months of the year. A lot of Chodeshes here. One of them is extra. Amra Torah, the Torah is telling us Chadesh, when it comes to the beginning of the Chatshe Hashanah, which is this Chadesh, now you have to renew. And V'havei Karbon Mitrum Chadosh, the Kabbalah you bring now should be from the new shekel that people are giving. The Gamri, and how do you know this is the month of Nisan? It all says in Chatshe Hashanah. It doesn't say which month. So the Gamri, we make a Gzei Shabbat. Shana, min Nisan. Here it says the word Chatshe Hashanah, and by Nisan it says Chatshe Hashanah. Where the Chsiv it says when it opens up all the dinim of Pesach, it says in Parshas Bo, Rishon hu lachem leChatshe Hashanah. That this is the first month of Chatshe Hashanah. So it says Shana, like the Shabbat, that is talking about Nisan. It says the Gemara, if your whole Gzei Shabbat is based on the word Shana, how do you know to learn out Shana means Nisan? That's when you have to use new coins. The Ligma Shana Metishrei, by Tishrei also we find the word Shana. The Chsiv it says Mereichis Hashana Donin. It says there that the beginning of the year Hashem judges us, and we know that's Tishrei. And therefore, and the Pasuk says Mereichis Hashana Ad Achil Shana. It says the word Shana there. So how do you know which Shana to equate to? How do you know that when he says you have to use the new coins, it means from the month of Nisan? Maybe the changeover is the month of Tishrei. Says the Gemara, Shana sheyesh imo donin, we judge or we equate. Shana sheyesh imo chadashim, mishana sheyesh imo chadashim. In the pasuk where it talks about the new coin, it says Chatshe Hashana. It doesn't just say Shana year, it says Chatshe Hashana. And when it talks about on Pesach, Hachodesh Elechem, there it says again, it says Hachodesh Elechem leChatshe Hashana. So we compare Chatshe Hashana to Chatshe Hashana. So we know this. But Tishrei doesn't mention the word Chadash. Now, Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Shmuel, who says the name of Shmuel. By the way, tomorrow you can learn the Gemara, an amazing thing. How do we even know that Rosh Hashanah is Judgment Day? Nowhere does the Torah say that Rosh Hashanah is Judgment Day. It just says Mereish Ez Hashem Akecha Doidesh Mereish Hashanah Achil Hashanah. Where do we know that Rosh Hashanah is Judgment Day? And it's amazing how we only learn that from a pasuk in Tehillim. That means in the Torah there's absolutely no clue, no indication that this is Judgment Day. We have to use a pasuk in Tehillim to inform us that. Quite spectacular. So the Gemara continues. So now that we ruled that you have to use the new coins, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, Kabbalah Tzibur, any communal korban, Haboyin be'echel b'Nisan, that comes from the first day of Nisan onwards, Mitzvah lahavi min hachadash. You got to bring from the new coins. Okay, but now he says, if you brought from the old ones, yatsa, you still fulfilled your obligation of communal korban. But you're missing out on a mitzvah. We just should have done the first new coin. You didn't do that. Tanya Namach, we actually let the Braisa to support that. Karbona Tzibur Haboyim Be'echad B'Nisan. Any carbon that comes from first days onwards, Mitzvah Lahavim El Achadish, bring from the new. But Vim Heivim El Ayash, no, Yotzi still Yaitza. Navash Chisim Mitzvah is missing out on Mitzvah. Then it continues. A Yachid, an individual, Shehis Nadiv Mishaloi, if an individual donated an animal of his own money, Shadin, you can use that for communal carbon. But conditional that he has to donate it wholeheartedly to the community, so it's no longer his private one. It's a carbon tzibur, it's a communal carbon. So you have to donate it to the whole tzibur. Says the Gemara Pshita, isn't that obvious? Isn't that obvious? So the Gemara said that if you donate it to the community, it's good enough. So you don't know. I would have thought. Leichish, why aren't we worried? Shema, perhaps, maybe he won't really donate it wholeheartedly. Maybe he wants to keep the credit or some kind of attachment to this animal. He donated it. He wants to have a chelik in more than anybody else. That we're not worried. We believe that he actually meant if he gave it for the communal as a communal carbon, he definitely meant it wholeheartedly. We already learned before in other Gemaras that there's actually an argument. We had in Rosh Hashana. There's an argument that people donated wholeheartedly or not. But here we're taking on that people do. Now the question is, V'tana didan. So how come our Mishnah doesn't mention that it's Nisan Rosh Hashana for the new coins? So we answer, Kivan diktani im hevi yotzet. The fact of the matter is, even if you did not use new coins, but the evidence it's all right. Therefore, like particular, our Mishnah didn't want to go there. Then he has to add those details. He's talking about things which are in absolute terms. Not things where you should, but if you didn't, it's still all right. That's not the purpose of our Mishnah. Then you brought down the yesh, that those who say aflas chilas bottom. That also, if you're renting a house, if you say you're renting a house for a year, obviously 12 months, day to day. But if you're saying I'm renting a house for the year ends Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Talmud we learned. If you rent a house to somebody, you say for the year. So he has 12 months, day to day. But if he says for this year, even though I rented the house from you the first day of Adar, as soon as you reach the first day of Nisan, also the year went by. And if he wants to stay on, he has to pay again. Taish already asked, we have a rule about Mitzvah that sometimes we say when we don't know exactly what happened, we say, let's look at the money. How much did the guy pass over pay? And then you can recognize from the money, that in itself indicates to us whether he wanted to rent it only for 1 month or for a year. So Taish says no, because we can interpret, even if he overpaid, he paid more like for a year than for a month. Maybe he paid for a month and the rest is key money, or the rest is a gift for being able to get into the house. So that you cannot use the money as evidence. Says the Gemara, so if you're going to follow that line of reasoning, what happened if you rented a house on the 29th day of Adar? And we know that there's a school of thought that a Yom Echad B'Shana, we had in before. If a king is only 1 day a king, the 29th day of Adar, it's already considered a year, and the Rosh Chodesh Nisan becomes year number 2. So what happened? You rent a house on the 29th day of Adar. He says, for this year. The next day, you have to pay again, because the year's over. Why don't we say that? So even according to the opinions of Yom Echad B'Shana, Rosh Hashana, Shani Hacha, when it comes to renting is different, because we assume that like Torach Inish, nobody in his right mind is going to go through the Tichum. Relocating requires a big effort. Lemega Besa, to rent a house and move all the stuff in, Lebotza Mitlasan Yom, the minimum time is 30 days. So therefore, the beginning is it's Rosh Chodesh Adar and no further. And as long as Chodesh Adar will say this year ends at the end of Adar. But if it's anything past that, definitely he can stay on longer. Says the Gemara, Ve'ema Tishrei. How do you know that? How do you know? Or why did you determine? It's not pasuk. This is just pure logic. So why did you decide that Nisan is considered a second year and make it Rosh Hashana? I mean, when we count years on the calendar, we usually count from Rosh Hashana. So why, when it comes to rentals, don't we count from Rosh Hashana the New Year? Why do we count from Nisan? Says the Gemara of Ve'ema Tishrei. Stam. Gemara is very simple. In the northern hemisphere, Tishrei goes into winter. Nobody wants to start looking for a house in the middle of the winter. It's too difficult. So you say, and it's rain, not just winter. It's raining all the time. Very difficult to move around. Tishrei Stam, generally, ki ogar inish besa. If a person rents a house, Elul, right before Rosh Hashana, look, there's no question he wanted to stay in that house the entire winter. So we don't believe for a minute when he said this year, he meant to end by Tishrei. But we do say it could mean end right before Nisan when spring comes in. The Tanakama the Bryce. So the Tanakama in the Bryce who doesn't agree that rental houses should be considered this, or Vitana they done our Mishnah doesn't mention at all Schiras Botim that Rosh Hashanah is Nisan. So how come it doesn't mention it? You might say, you know why? Because Nisan Nami Mishka Shkia Kitri. Because Nisan is still rains, winter isn't totally over, and we don't believe people when they say this year in the month of Adar they really mean to move out Nisan. People want to stay longer. So how much longer? So big machlek is in showing how to learn Shadia. But many, the Shachar Mishra, many learn that it means is that there's no such difference between this year or a year. But if you pay the money and you say this year or a year, you meant 12 months. The people move in, they generally want to stay for a longer time. Doesn't matter when they move in. That's why our Mishnah doesn't include it because it actually argues in Halach. Okay, so we finished discussing Rosh Hashanah in Nisan. Then we bring an argument, Rameya and Rav Shimon, Maisa Behema. According to Rameya, Behema is the first day of El, and according to Rav Shimon, the Behema, Maisa Behema is the first day of Tishrei. Says the Gemara, Maisa Behema, Mani. So who is that of you? Rameya. That view is Rameya. Because it says, Rameya says, the Mishnah doesn't give us a name, it says the first day of El, but we know that's Rameya. Rameya, Rosh Hashanah, Maisa Behema. So Rav Meir holds that the first day of El is Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema. Now, in the beginning, so this middle part, this Rosh Hashanah is obviously following Rav Meir. The Mishnah opens up that Nisan is Rosh Hashanah for Yom Tov. Who holds that? Ulragoli Mani. That's not Rav Meir. If you remember, Rav Meir holds one Yom Tov and you're already over Baal Ta'ach. Just one Yom Tov. And the Mishnah says that Rosh Hashanah Regalim is Nisan, which means that you need 3 Yom Tov. So the beginning of the Mishnah definitely does not follow Rav Meir. In fact, who does it follow? Rav Shimon. Because it's 3 Yom Tov and it has to be a particular sequence. Ulragoli Mani Rav Shimoni. Okay, so the beginning of the Mishnah is Rav Shimon. The next Rosh Hashanah is Rav Meir. And then it says, Rabbi Loz, Rav Shimon, Be'echad B'Tishrei. But Rav Shimon says the first day of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for Ma'aseh Behema. Very confusing. So Reisha, the very first case in the Mishnah Hashanah Regalim is Rav Shimon. Seifa, the first day of Tishrei is Rav Shimon. And when Mitziyas is Rav Meir, and then the middle of Rosh Hashanah of El is Rav Meir. Very confusing. Amar Rabbi Yosef, how can that be? So who is the author of Mishnah, Rav Meir or Rav Shimon? Can't be both. Amar Rabbi Yosef says, Rebbe. In fact, the author of the Mishnah is not Rav Meir and not Rav Shimon, it's Rebbe. And in each Rosh Hashanah, he's telling us what he rules like, or who he rules like. The Nas of Law Alibet Tanoi, and he's bringing it according to Tanoi. But regardless, when it comes to Yom Tovim, he doesn't agree with Rav Meir, Sovla, Rav Shimon. He agrees with Rav Shimon. Uve Ma'aseh Behema. When it comes to Ma'aseh Behema, Sovla, Rav Meir. There he rules like Rav Meir that the first day of El is Rosh Hashanah. Says the Gemara, if so, why does the Mishnah say there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs? Chamish is 5. How do you have 5? You have the first day of Nisan is Rosh Hashanah for kings. The 15th day of Nisan is for the Golem. You have the first day of Elul for Ma'aseh Behema. You have the first day of Tishrei for Shtaris, as we'll see later, for Goyish kings. And then you have Shvat. So you have 5 Rosh Hashanahs. Why does the Mishnah say 4? No, but if the Mishnah would be Rav Shimon doesn't believe that the first day of El is Rosh Hashanah for Behemoth, so there's only 4 Rosh Hashanahs. But now that you tell me it's Rebbe, and Rebbe therefore learns like Rameh, the first day of El is also Rosh Hashanah, and the first day of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for Shemitah and Yevus and those other things, we have 5 Rosh Hashanahs. Says the Gemara, if so, Arba Chamisha is 5. Omar Rabba says, Rabba, no, this is what the Mishnah meant when he said 4. That everyone holds up 4 Rosh Hashanahs, but it depends who. The Rav Meir, there's Abba. Rav Meir also holds the 4 Rosh Hashanahs. He holds the first day of Nisan is Rosh Hashanah, but he holds that the 15th day of Nisan is not Rosh Hashanah Regalim. He holds there is no Rosh Hashanah Regalim because he holds if you're over 1 Yom Tov, you're already over Baal Ta'ach. It doesn't matter which Yom Tov it is. So there's no 15th day of Nisan. So according to Rav Meir, the first day of Nisan, first day of Elul for Behemoth, first day of Tishrei you have for Shemitah and Yevus, and then the 15th day of Shvat for Tu B'Shvat. So you have 4. According to Rav Shimon, he omits first day of Elul, but he includes 15th day of Nisan for the 3 Yom Tovim. So this is what he meant Abba Rosh Hashanah. Regardless of which Tana you follow, each Tana only holds the 4 Rosh Hashanahs. Says Amar Rav Abba, the Divrei Hakol is only 4 Rishonim. So Meir Abba, according to Meir, there's 4 because Dal Regolim, omit Yom Tevim, because he holds that any Yom Tov you pass by, you're already over. And the Rab Shimon Abba also 4, because Dal Maisa Behema, he doesn't believe the first day of El. That's one answer. And Nachmed by Yitzchak Amar, no, you misunderstood the Mishnah. Not that there are 4 Rosh Hashanah. There are 4 months that have Rosh Hashanahs in them. But there could be a total of 5. Nisan can have 2 Rosh Hashanahs. First day of Nisan is for dating the Shtar's contract, and the 15th day of Nisan is for dating the Easter of Baal Ta'achar. Even though there's 2 in Nisan, it's counted like 1 because the month of Nisan is 1. Abba Chadosh in that 4 month, Uvehen Kama Rosh Hashanah, but within them you have a number of Rosh Hashanahs. So Rachel asks you a question. Shisha also Nisan Rosh Hashanah Laimeh, but the more Rosh Hashanahs. For example, the 16th day of Nisan is Rosh Hashanah, the new crop. You have to wait till the 2nd day of Pesach. You bring the oim of the barley to the base of English, and they bring the mincha of the barley, and then you can start eating the new crop. That's Rosh Hashanah. And so too, Shisha B'Sivan, the 6th day of Sivan, Rosh Hashanah, L'shtei Lecha. The 6th day of Sivan is Rosh Hashanah. They bring the 2 loaves of bread of wheat, and that's when you can start bringing wheat to the base of English. So there's another Rosh Hashanah. So the Rav, according to Rav,
that's not Rosh Hashanah. You can't say that everything the first time you do it is Rosh Hashanah.
That's what our mission is saying. Every time that you calculate a new year.
I don't understand that. Shana means year. It's the
not the first time you do it.
It doesn't mean the beginning of anything else relating to what you're doing during the year.
It's not the first time you're doing it. It's considered a new year for the crop. In other words, last year's crop was forbidden until today. And today the crop becomes permitted. So that is like a new year. It's a new year for crop.
Not a new year, it's a new year, it's a new start for a particular item, a particular issue that we're dealing with. That's
but
not
it has to do with time. It has to do with time. Everything till now and everything from now. So we're saying over here is that this covers everything that grew till now is now permitted. And anything grows from now is a new cheshbon. So that's what it is. It's a transition from one phase to another phase. That's what like a new year is. So how come our Mishnah doesn't mention? Now we're asking, according to Rav, one second. According to Rav, who says that we're not talking about months, we're talking about actual Rosh Hashanahs, and he said according to each Tana of 4, there should be 6. At least in the Shisha, you have Omer and you have the Shtei Lechem. Rav Nachman said we're talking about months. Okay, so Nisan now has 3 Rosh Hashanahs in it, but it's counted as 1. You have the first day of Nisan for contracts, you have the 15th day of Nisan for Yom Tevim, and you have the 16th day for new crop. Okay, it's considered 1. But what about Sivan? Rav Nachman, it's Chamisha 5, because Sivan, for Shtei Lechem, it's something new. Amar Papa answers, Kika Choshev, he only counts Midid Chayo Me'urta. He only counts things that start at night. But Midid Chayo Me'urta like a Choshev. He only counts things, for example, as soon as Yom Tov comes in, as soon as the Shchei comes in, it's a new year for the Shtaras. As soon as Yom Tov comes in, we'll see there's a new, it's Regal and Baal Ta'achar. But when it comes to Omer and it comes to Shtei Lechem, that's done in the day. It doesn't start at night. It's in the day. When you bring it, that's when you're permitted. That's when the new year begins. And we're not counting that. Says the Gemara, that's how it works. You're only counting things that start at night. But how did it go? What about Regolim when it comes to Yom Tovim, which talks about Baal Ta'achar? So right now we think that Baal Ta'achar, you should have brought it the first day of Yom Tov. And when are you able Baal Ta'achar? When you're able to bring it. When can you bring a carbon on Yom Tov? Not at night. You can only bring in the daytime after you brought the carbon tamid. So even that also only applies during the day. So how come the Mishnah counts it? By Regolim. It doesn't begin at night. Yet it's calculated, it's counted in. Says the Gemara, the Avera about the Ta'achar starts. The moment you make a promise to bring an animal, you should bring it straight away. And when Yom Tov comes along, that's when you are over. So therefore, as soon as you made your promise, you already have to bring your carbon, even before Yom Tov. And so when we say that Yom Tov, you're over Baal Ta'achar, is only regarding that you're over an Aveda. And therefore, as soon as Yom Tov kicks in, you're already over. You're already chayev. That's how Rashi learns Pshat in the Gemara, which comes out an interesting thing. According to Rashi, it seems that when are you over Baal Ta'achar? As soon as Yom Tov starts. We always assume that Baal Ta'achi not over until Yom Tov is over. You could have brought a Chol Hamoed, the third Yom Tov. If you didn't bring it till the very end, that's when you're over. The way Rashi learns Gemara here, it sounds like you are over straight away, as soon as it starts. And Tosfos here has a problem with this Rashi, and he tries to learn a different Pshat Rashi altogether. But that's what Rashi seems to be saying, that you're over as soon as the third Yom Tov is not the end of the third Yom Tov, it's the beginning of the third Yom Tov. Even though according to Rameir, when he says one Yom Tov, it means the end, but according to Rav Shimon, the three Yom Tov, it sounds like it means as soon as the Yom Tov comes in, you should have brought it before. You didn't, you're over. So Tosfos learns, therefore, means, what it means at the beginning of Yom Tov, you're over, means if you made your promise the first night of Yom Tov, 5 minutes after Yom Tov began, then you can bring a carbon. We don't count this Yom Tov as the first Yom Tov because you already missed out part of it. Your first Yom Tov starts the next one. That's what it means, according to Tosfos. Anyway, Gemara continues. What about Yovel? Yovel is included. We count Yovel Rosh Hashanah. When does Yovel begin? Yovel begins on the 10th day of Yom Kippur. That's why we blow shofar today, even to remember, according to one opinion, to remember the Yovel, even though it's only once every 50 years, we still do it to remember the Yovel. So when do they blow the shofar? On the 10th day, during the day. And that's when the slaves are set free, the properties have to be returned to the original owners. So it all happens by day. And yet the Mishnah counts it as one of the Rosh Hashanahs. You're telling me that he only counts Rosh Hashanahs that start as soon as night comes in. And that's why we omitted the Omer, and that's why we omitted Shtei Lechem. So what about Yovel? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yishmael b'noi Rabbi Yochanan Bereiki, the author of our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yishmael, which is actually the Halachah Amar. He says, Rosh Hashana Chayil Yovel. He says that as soon as the 50th Jubilee comes in, Rosh Hashanah already starts. The slaves do not go home until Yom Kippur, but they no longer work for their masters from Rosh Hashanah. For 10 days, they sit there and they parade and they party and so on. So it starts as soon as Rosh Hashanah begins. He gives another answer why we don't include the Omer or we don't include Shtei Lechem. He says, you know why? We're only counting things that it is. As soon as the first day of Nisan comes around, it is the new year. And as soon as the first day of Pesach comes around, this is the Yom Tovim for the 3 Yom Tovim. There's nothing to do. It's automatic. But the Omer, you have to do something to enable you to eat the new crop. You have to bring this minchas Omer, the barley. By Shtei Lechem, you have to bring the 2 loaves of bread to the Mizbech, and in order to enable to bring the new crop of wheat for Menachah. So therefore, that's different than what Amish is talking about, a state of being, and these are talking about activities that you do to bring in the new year for that particular item. We're only counting things which do not depend on any activity. But things which depend on activity, we don't count. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? The goal immediately you have to remember again, we said before, or think again, right now we think that you're not over about the acher until you're able, the same thing we thought before, until you're able to bring the carbon, which requires the tamid shachar to be brought first. So an activity has to happen first before Baal Ta'acha kicks in. Says the Gemara, we answer Baal Ta'acha me'melechad. Same we said before. As soon as night comes in, you're already over Baal Ta'acha. Like it seems from Rashi before, as soon as the third Yom Tov comes in, you're over Baal Ta'acha straight away. We don't have to wait till the carbon tamid in the morning. Says the Gemara, what about Yovel? You have to blow shofar on Yom Kippur to bring Yovel, to announce, to proclaim, the freedom of the slaves. We answer again the same we said before. Rabbi Yishmael b'noi Bereiki, this follows Rabbi Yishmael Bereiki. He holds it's not the shofar. As soon as Rosh Hashanah comes around, it's already considered Yovel. And the last answer, Rabbi Ashi gives another answer. You know why our Mishnah does not count the Omer, does not count the Shtei Lechem? Because Arba Rosh Hashanim Heim Sheheim Ba'arba Rosh Chodashim. We're only counting Rosh Hashanahs which begin in the beginning of the month. We only count Rosh Hashanah beginning of the month. What do you call it? That's why we don't count the Omer, and that's why we don't count the Shtei Lechem, because they're not the beginning of the month. And even though we're counting for Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we mentioned the Golem is not really considered Rosh Hashanah because it's only Rosh Chodesh Nisan that's considered Rosh Hashanah. We just say the month that has the Golem in it, but the Rosh Hashanah is because it's Rosh Hashanah for the kings, and then there's a new start. Says the Gemara. Be'echad b'shvat ki b'shamai. So it comes out a weird thing then. If our mission is only counting Rosh Hashana, which is the beginning of the month, so when it comes to the month of Shvat, Shammai says that the Rosh Hashana L'Ilana is Echad b'Shvat, and Beis Hillel says it's Tu b'Shvat. So if you're telling me that our Tana only counts the beginning of the month, that means our Tana follows by Shammai, which is very odd. Says the Gemara, Hachikam, this is what you mean. Shloisha L'Hakel, 3 Rosh Hashanas, which are the beginning of the month according to everybody. And when it comes to the first day of Shvat, not everyone agrees. Shammai says it's the first day of Shvat, but Beis Hillel says it's the middle of Shvat. Even though there's also argument regarding the first day of Elul, the first day of Tisha, but at least they both hold as Rosh Chodesh. It's the beginning of the month. But you're saying Shvat is the middle. He's telling us machlekes. Okay, everyone have a Shavua Tov, a good vach, and we'll see you next week in Mitzvah Shem.